Ethan Rivera had stopped believing in second chances. After years of saving lives as a paramedic, he had seen what broken people looked like, and now he was one of them. The night he caught his boyfriend, Marcus, whispering to someone else on the phone, something inside him cracked. There had been no shouting, no dramatic ending, just silence, the kind of silence that follows when trust is gone. Since then, Ethan threw himself into work. The long hours, the sirens, the city lights flashing past his ambulance window. Those became his routine, his way of not thinking about the empty side of the bed. It was on one of those late, rain-soaked nights that a call came in. "Fire at the old warehouse on 18th, the dispatcher said through the radio. "One firefighter down." Ethan grabbed his gear and climbed into the ambulance, his heart steady but heavy. He didn't expect the call to change anything, he just wanted to do his job and move on. But fate had other plans. The smell of smoke hit him first. The fire glowed orange against the night sky, rain sizzling on metal as firefighters moved like shadows through the chaos. And then he saw him, sitting on the curb, breathing hard, his uniform covered in soot. Ethan rushed over, kneeling down beside him. "Hey, stay still," he said calmly, shining his light across the man's face. His name badge read Carter. "Liam Carter," the man said hoarsely before Ethan could ask. "Don't worry, I've had worse." There was a faint grin beneath the soot, the kind that tried to make light of pain. Ethan checked his pulse, then his breathing. Liam winced when Ethan's hand brushed near his shoulder. "You've got a deep cut here," Ethan murmured, wrapping it carefully. Liam tried to joke again, but his voice wavered. "Guess I'm not as fireproof as I thought." Ethan couldn't help a small smile. "No one is," he said. For a moment, their eyes met through the haze of rain and smoke, and Ethan felt something unfamiliar. Connection. Not attraction, not yet, but the strange sense of seeing another person's strength wrapped in vulnerability. As the ambulance sped toward the hospital, Liam talked quietly, as if trying to distract himself from the pain. He told Ethan he'd been on the force for 5 years, that he loved his job. But lately, he'd been struggling with the weight of it all. The near calls, the sleepless nights. Ethan listened, his hands steady, his voice calm. He didn't tell Liam that he understood exactly what that felt like. That he too knew what it meant to feel alive in the middle of chaos and empty once it was over. When they arrived at the hospital, Ethan helped Liam out of the ambulance. "You'll be fine," he said. "They'll take care of you here." Liam nodded, but before he was wheeled away, he caught Ethan's hand for a brief moment. "Thanks, man. You've got a calm about you. Makes things hurt less." Ethan blinked, unsure what to say. He just nodded and stepped back as the doors closed between them. That night, when Ethan went home, the sound of rain followed him. He sat on his couch exhausted, replaying Liam's words. "Makes things hurt less." He hadn't heard kindness like that in a long time. Not since before Marcus's betrayal turned every kind word into an echo of something lost. Ethan told himself he'd probably never see Liam again. It was just another patient, another night. But the thought didn't feel right. Something about the way Liam had looked at him lingered. 3 days later, Ethan found himself walking through the hospital's emergency wing on his lunch break. He told himself he was just dropping off paperwork, but when he passed room 214, he stopped. Liam was sitting up in bed, his arm in a sling, watching the rain through the window. "Hey," Ethan said, half smiling. "Looks like you're back in one piece." Liam turned, surprised but happy to see him. "You again? Guess the city's small after all." Ethan stayed longer than he meant to. They talked about simple things, weather, sports, bad hospital food. But slowly the conversation deepened. Liam mentioned losing a teammate in a rescue gone wrong, how guilt still woke him at night. Ethan understood that kind of pain, the kind that stayed quiet but constant. "You did what you could," he said softly. "Sometimes that has to be enough." Liam nodded, looking at him in a way that said he believed him. As Ethan got up to leave, Liam smiled faintly. "You ever notice how strangers can sometimes make you feel safer than the people you know best?" Ethan paused at the door, heart heavy but warm. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I've noticed." Outside, the rain had stopped, and for the first time in months, Ethan felt like something inside him might be healing too. Slowly, carefully, the way wounds do when someone finally treats them with care. Liam's recovery took longer than expected, but Ethan didn't seem to mind. Every few days between ambulance calls, he found himself walking through the quiet hospital corridors toward room 214. He always told himself it was just to check on a patient, but both men knew it was more than that. They'd started talking like old friends, the kind who didn't need small talk to fill silence. Ethan would bring coffee, and Liam would joke that it was the best thing that happened to him all week. It was simple, easy, something Ethan hadn't felt in a long time. Sometimes they talked about work, the stress, the close calls, the fear that followed them home after every shift. Other times, they talked about the things they didn't say to anyone else. One evening, as rain tapped against the window, Liam admitted he hadn't been sleeping well. "It's the nightmares," he said quietly. "Sometimes I still see the fire when I close my eyes." Ethan didn't try to fix it. He just listened. That was what Liam liked about him. He didn't fill the air with empty comfort. He just let things be real. Ethan knew all about sleepless nights. For him, it wasn't flames that haunted his dreams. It was Marcus's voice, the memory of what he'd lost, and the ache of wondering if love was supposed to hurt that much. When Marcus texted him out of the blue saying, "I miss you, let's talk," Ethan didn't reply. Not yet. He wasn't ready to face old wounds when he was barely learning how to breathe again. A few days later, Liam was strong enough to walk around the ward. When Ethan arrived, he found him sitting by the window, sunlight touching his face. "Look who's finally up," Ethan said with a grin. Liam laughed softly. "Turns out I heal fast when I've got good company." His words carried a lightness that made Ethan's chest tighten. For a moment, neither of them spoke. There was something quiet and safe between them, a kind of peace neither had known in months. Then came the afternoon that changed everything. Liam was scheduled to have his bandages removed for the last time, and Ethan offered to help. It should have been routine. But as Ethan carefully peeled away the last strip of gauze, he noticed Liam watching him, steady, calm, eyes filled with gratitude. "You can touch it," Liam said softly, nodding toward the scar that crossed his shoulder. Ethan hesitated. "It's okay," Liam added. "You've been patching people up for years, right? Guess it's your thing." Ethan smiled nervously, but let his fingers trace the edge of the scar, lightly, respectfully, not as a medic, but as someone who finally understood what healing meant. The skin was warm, the mark fading but still there, a reminder of what survived. "Does it hurt?" Ethan asked. Liam shook his head. "Not anymore." Their eyes met for a moment too long before Ethan pulled back. "Good," he said quietly, pretending to busy himself with the bandages. But his pulse betrayed him, racing faster than it should have. They didn't talk about that moment, not then. Instead, Liam thanked him, and Ethan smiled like it was nothing. But when he left the room, the air outside felt different, like he'd just crossed a line he couldn't quite define. That night, as he drove home through the city lights, Marcus called again. This time, Ethan answered. They spoke briefly, politely. Marcus wanted to meet, to explain, to start over. Ethan listened, but all he could think of was Liam, his steady gaze, his calm strength, the way he had said, "You've got good hands." A few days later, Ethan found Liam outside the hospital, wearing a loose jacket and holding a cup of coffee. "You got discharged," Ethan said, smiling. Liam nodded. "Finally. Feels weird to leave." He hesitated, then added, "You know, sometimes people come into your life when you least expect them. And then suddenly, they mean something." Ethan didn't know what to say. He wanted to tell Liam he felt the same, but the words caught in his throat. Liam looked down at his coffee, then back at him. "Don't worry," he said gently. "I'm not asking for anything, just thanks for being here." Ethan nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "You don't have to thank me," he said. "You helped me too." They stood there in silence for a moment. Two people who had both been burned by life, somehow finding comfort in the ashes. When Liam reached out and briefly squeezed Ethan's hand, it wasn't romantic. It was human, sincere. A quiet way of saying, "You helped me heal." As Ethan watched Liam walk away into the fading afternoon light, he realized something important. Healing didn't always happen in hospitals or through medicine. Sometimes it happened in small moments between strangers who chose to care, and maybe, just maybe, that was the beginning of something neither of them could name yet. but both of them needed ChatGPT-K. Weeks passed, and life slowly found its rhythm again. Ethan threw himself back into his shifts, early mornings, late nights, and endless calls that blurred one into another. But something inside him had changed. The noise of the city didn't feel so heavy anymore, and when the sirens faded, silence didn't hurt like it used to. He still thought about Liam sometimes, his steady voice, his quiet smile, but he wasn't sure if he'd ever see him again. Sometimes people crossed your path only long enough to remind you what it meant to feel alive again. One afternoon, Ethan was finishing paperwork when his phone buzzed. Marcus's name flashed across the screen. He hadn't heard from him in weeks. Against his better judgment, Ethan opened the message. "Can we talk?" "Just once." After a long pause, he replied, "Okay." Maybe closure wasn't a bad thing. Maybe it was time. They met at a small cafe near the hospital, the same place Ethan used to wait for Marcus after his shifts. The familiarity was strange, almost hollow. Marcus looked the same, sharp, confident, eyes that once made Ethan feel safe, but now only reminded him of everything that had fallen apart. "You look good," Marcus said softly, trying to smile. Ethan nodded. "You too." For a while, neither spoke. Finally, Marcus sighed. "I made mistakes, Ethan. I got scared. I stopped being honest. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want you to know I never stopped caring." His voice was sincere, but Ethan felt detached, as if the pain had been replaced by distance. He took a slow breath and said, "I believe you. But I also believe that caring isn't the same as loving, and love shouldn't make you feel small." Marcus looked down, regret flickering across his face. "You've changed," he whispered. Ethan smiled faintly. "I had to." He stood up, slipping his jacket on. "You can't heal someone by reopening the same wounds," he said gently. "Take care of yourself, Marcus." Then he walked out, the cool autumn air washing over him like a quiet relief. As Ethan crossed the street, sunlight cut through the clouds, soft and golden. For the first time in a long while, he felt light, like the weight he'd been carrying had finally let go. He pulled out his phone and hesitated before typing a message. "How's the shoulder?" A few minutes later, a reply came. "Still there, but not hurting anymore." A photo followed. A faint scar running across Liam's shoulder, framed by warm light. Ethan smiled, typing back, "Good. You deserve that peace." That weekend, they met at the park. It was one of those crisp days where the air smelled faintly of rain and cut grass. Liam was already there, sitting on a bench, holding 2 cups of coffee. "You remembered how I take it," Ethan said as he sat down. "Of course," Liam replied. "You used to bring it to me every morning in the hospital." Hard to forget that. They talked for hours, about work, about recovery, about how strange it was to start feeling whole again. There was no tension now, no hesitation, just ease. At one point, Liam laughed, shaking his head. "It's funny, you know. I thought that fire was going to be the end of me. Turns out it was the start of something else." Ethan glanced at him, smiling softly. "Maybe that's what healing looks like, when the thing that nearly breaks you ends up saving you." For a while, they just sat there in silence, watching the sun dip low behind the trees. The world felt quiet, but not empty. Liam looked down, then said, "Do you ever think about the people who hurt us?" Ethan nodded. "Sometimes, but not with anger anymore. Just gratitude. If they hadn't left, maybe we wouldn't have learned how to start again." Liam reached over, his hand brushing lightly against Ethan's. It wasn't a grand gesture, not a confession, just a silent agreement that what they shared didn't need to be rushed or defined. Healing wasn't about filling the empty space with someone new. It was about realizing you're no longer afraid to feel. As the city lights flickered on in the distance, Ethan felt a calm settle over him, a peace he hadn't known in years. Marcus was part of his past, but Liam was part of something different. The present, the moment, the quiet possibility of what comes after pain. When they finally stood to leave, Liam smiled. "Guess we both survived our fires." Ethan chuckled softly. "Yeah," he said, "and maybe that's what makes us brave." They walked side by side toward the street, their steps unhurried. No promises, no dramatic endings, just 2 men who had both learned that sometimes love isn't about mending what's broken. It's about learning to live with the scars and still choosing to hope. And as the wind carried the last glow of daylight across their faces, Ethan realized that his heart, for the first time in a long while, wasn't healing anymore. It had healed.